Well, U.S. home building bouncing back in February. The new residential construction jumped 10.7% in February from the month prior to an annualized pace of more than 1.5 million units. That's according to the Commerce Department. While home affordability continues to be a challenge for many Americans, the expectation the Fed could cut interest rates this year is making people more optimistic that we could be in a buyer's market. So for more on the housing sector, we're joined by Jim Tobin, who is the National Association of Home Builders Chief Executive Officer and President. The NAHB has had some news of its own this week. We'll dive into that, of course, here, Jim. But what more noticeably are you seeing in this environment, and are we set up for a shift in the sentiment out there?
Good morning. Yeah, I do think we are set for a shift in sentiment. I see optimism. We were just at our large annual trade show just a couple of weeks ago, and the vibe amongst all of the attendees was optimism. I really think they are looking at 2024 as this pivot year where we come out of the high interest rate environment. Hopefully, we'll see some of those Fed rate cuts through the course of this year, but really demand starting to come back, and of course, our members are ready to respond by building more homes and apartments.
Jim, what happens if we don't get 3 rate cuts? What happens if it's 2, or God forbid, if it's 0? What then happens to home builders?
Well, we are optimistic that it's at least 2. Some people were forecasting something a little earlier in the year. We think that the rates are going to be backloaded into the second half of the year. But I think we're not anticipating that. We're really thinking that the economy is going to keep moving along at a nice pace. I know there's been some concern about a little spike in inflation, especially in the shelter inflation piece. But I think that we will continue to see rates moderate into the 6% range. And again, we're still waiting for people to get used to the new normal out here, rather than those 3 or 4% rates that we got used to over the last 4 or 5 years. So again, we're optimistic, and hopefully the Fed will see that the right thing to do is to keep moving the country forward by bringing those rates down.
Of course, this week we got the National Association of Home Builders, the builder sentiment report that came out. That came out on March 18th, and just yesterday we heard from the chief economist Robert Dietz saying, however, as home building activity picks up, builders will likely grapple with rising material prices, particularly for lumber. How apt is the consumer environment to really take on more of this pricing as new construction comes about?
Yeah, I mean, between labor and material prices, and then you have to factor in lot costs as well. I think ultimately, if demand surges and building continues to move forward, but not at the pace to meet that pent up demand, I do see some spikes in prices coming. And lumber in particular, we saw those price spikes right after the COVID lockdowns, when home building really got going. It's just that we're not sure that the lumber companies are really getting ready for a surge in demand, that they're kind of waiting for us to get a little farther ahead. And if we do that, then I think the fear is that the lumber company is going to play catch up, which means a supply crunch and then price spikes. And of course, that just translates into higher construction costs.
Jim, I'm curious, the big headline, or one of the big headlines, I should say, within your industry over the last week has been the NAR settlement and the cap that this is placing on commission fees. I'm curious, does that have an impact on home builders, or what does that mean then for home builders going forward, just in terms of whether or not they're able potentially to save money maybe in the long run, or is there any impact?
Sure. Home builders operate very much as just a buyer or a seller. Realtors are involved in a lot of those, if not most of those transactions when buying a new home. So if commission prices come down, then of course the cost of the builder, if the builder is selling the home, they've been on the hook for that 6% to help that buyer get into the home. So I think as commissions come down, or hopefully we're priced down, I hope that we will see costs to builders come down as well, and that just translates into lower home prices for consumers. But again, we have to see how this all shakes out. But it was a big move this week with NAR's decision.
Jim, I'm curious, have you heard from any of the home builders just how they're thinking about this and how big of a boost maybe they see it potentially being to activity here in the longer run?
Yeah, at the end of the day, for the members of the National Association, it's all about home price and building an affordable home or apartment, and anything that helps make it more affordable for Americans to get into homes, that's a good thing. And if commissions are part of that, that's one part of the equation. The real answer in the long term, though, is something that the president said in his State of the Union speech. We have just got to build more homes and apartments. We have got to increase supply. So for us, the ultimate panacea for the housing affordability crisis is more homes and more apartments.
Jim, look, I'm an aspirational homeowner one day. What's the hot market that you're seeing everybody flock to right now, or where we're seeing the most spikes? Just so I have some things to consider out there. I know that Redfin is saying Portland, Oregon, in their report that came out this morning, looking particularly across the home price index. I think the only thing that could get me out there is probably Bandon Dunes Golf Resort. But what are you seeing?
Actually, I've been visiting with friends in the Portland market this week, and it's true that the Portland market, very tight, needs more housing, high home prices, but yet Portland is really starting to wake up to the fact that they've got a supply and affordability problem. So yes, I think we're starting to see some activity out here on the West Coast, but I still think the hot markets are always going to be in the Southeast. Texas, moving east over into Florida and the Carolinas. They just have a low regulatory environment. They've got a very welcoming, pro home building, pro apartment attitude down there. And they've got the weather. Not that Portland isn't lovely this time of year, but at the end of the day, the Southeast continues to be the boom town when it comes to home building in the country.
What do you think? Where are you going?
Oh,
Portland or Southeast?
It's brick in Portland this time of the year. I'm not going out there. I got to get a stronger jacket, Jim. It's not that good.
All right, Jim, always great to talk to you. Thanks so much for joining us here on Yahoo Finance today. Jim Tobin, National Association of Home Builders, CEO and President. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.